Behind that kitchen door, death waited quietly for its moment. Welcome to Clue Law. I am your host, Vale. Tell me your location in the comments. Your messages make each mystery feel shared. Into the story. If there's a single thing you can say about Nero Wolfe's brownstone on West 35th Street, it's that it runs on rails. Not the kind the subway uses either. I mean rails like a private roadbed laid down by an obstinate genius who decided long ago that the world was a sloppy nuisance and he'd tolerate it only on his own terms. Breakfast at 8:15, beer at 11, orchids from 9 to 11:30. Lunch at 1:15, dinner at 7:15, and woe betide any living soul who tried to wedge a stray event between those times. So, when the kitchen door opened at 10:42 in the morning, I knew before I looked up from my desk that something was wrong with the universe. The kitchen door is not supposed to open at 10:42. At 10:42, Fritz Brenner is in his domain, and the door might as well be a bank vault. The only reason it ever opens is because he wants it to, and Fritz doesn't want it to unless he's carrying a tray with a pot of coffee that smells like Vienna, and a plate of something that makes dieting sound like a moral crime. This time, the door opened without a tray, and the head that came through wasn't Fritz's. I swung my chair half around, because that's what you do when weirdness knocks at your spine. The head belonged to a young woman. Not young like a college sophomore giggling through life, but young in that polished city way that says she's been forced to grow up fast and decided to do it in expensive shoes. Her hair was the shade of dark honey you see in magazine ads and never in real donuts. She wore a gray coat that probably cost more than my last 5 suits combined, and she had a face built for confidence until you noticed how tightly she was holding it in place. She didn't step in. She hovered in the doorway like she'd walked into a church by mistake. "Is Mr. Goodwin here?" she asked. "Depends what for," I said, because I'm Archie Goodwin and it's in my bloodstream. "If you're delivering a subpoena, I'm in Cleveland." Her mouth twitched, but the smile didn't quite make it. "I'm not delivering anything. I need to see Mr. Wolfe." "Everybody does." I got up. The best thing to do with a hovering stranger is to stop giving her the altitude advantage. "But he doesn't always need to see everybody." "How did you get in there?" "I rang. The man at the door said I could wait in the kitchen." Her eyes flicked as if expecting a scolding. "I didn't know I shouldn't come through." The man at the door was probably Theodore Horstman, who has a charitable streak that will be his undoing if Wolfe doesn't kill it first. I slid closer. "Name?" "Lila Kerr." The name didn't ring a bell. That didn't mean much. In my line, names are like cab receipts. You can have a pocketful and still be lost. "Okay, Miss Kerr, let's do it properly." I jerked my thumb toward the front room. "Come in, sit down, and tell me what made you ignore the sanctity of Fritz's kitchen. If it's good, I'll take you to Wolfe. If it's not, I'll take you to the sidewalk." She hesitated half a breath, then came in, moving with the kind of quick smoothness that tries to pretend it's not nervous. I caught a whiff of something crisp and expensive. Not perfume exactly, more like the clean edge of a high-end department store. I steered her through the hall and into the office. Wolfe was in his chair, of course. He looked like a large, composed Buddha who'd done his thinking for the day and was waiting for the next civilization to show up. On his desk sat the morning mail, a fat envelope from the plant people, and a glass of water he wouldn't touch unless the world ended. His eyes, when he turned them on you, were about as welcoming as a locked safe. "Miss Kerr," I said. "She says she needs to see you. She has also committed the felony of exiting Fritz's kitchen without an escort." Wolfe's eyes moved from me to her and stayed there, bleak and measuring. "You are Lila Kerr?" "Yes. You are expected." The last word was aimed at me. "Not by me," I said. "Maybe by the calendar. It's done stranger things." Wolfe didn't rise. If I ever see Wolfe rise for a client, I'll assume a meteor is on the way. "Sit down, Miss Kerr. Mr. Goodwin will remain. He is my assistant and my stenographer. Occasionally he is even useful." She sat in the red leather chair, hands folded neatly in her lap as if she'd memorized etiquette for facing lions. I sat at my desk and pulled the notepad near. The notepad is mostly a prop because Wolfe doesn't rely on my records unless he has to, but it makes clients feel like their words might not evaporate into the wallpaper. "You have come," Wolfe said, "because you wish to hire me or because you are foolish enough to believe I will assist you without compensation." "Which is it?" She blinked once. "Not 2 or 3, just once." Controlled. "I want to hire you." "Good. Money is a proof of seriousness. Your business." She drew in a small breath. "Something has happened at my apartment." Wolfe stared at her as if she'd said the sun was up. "That is not business." "It's not exactly my apartment. I live there, but it belongs to the Kerr Foundation. I'm on the board. It's part of a trust." "Ah," Wolfe said. And that single syllable meant he'd found a thread worth tugging. "The Kerr Foundation? Humanitarian? Educational?" "Culinary heritage," she said, and I felt my eyebrows try to go up by themselves. "We fund programs for traditional cooking schools and apprenticeships. My great-grandfather built it." Wolfe's head tilted a fraction, which for him is an athletic move. "Culinary heritage. Interesting. Proceed." She straightened. "Last night, someone tried to enter my apartment through the service corridor. The building has a private kitchen off the hallway. It's mostly for catering, but I use it sometimes. When I came home at 11, I heard the kitchen door handle moving. It didn't open. I went in and found scratch marks around the lock." "Did you call the police?" Wolfe asked. "No." "Why not?" "Because I'm not sure that's what it was." Wolfe's eyes hardened. "You said someone tried to enter. Now you're not sure. Which is true?" "Both." She clasped her hands tighter. "There are things in that kitchen that should not interest strangers. Family things. Records. Recipes. A box of old letters. Yesterday morning I found the box moved on the shelf. Not stolen. Just moved and opened. I put it back where it belongs. Then last night the door handle." Wolfe watched her, giving nothing away but attention. "A box of letters and recipes. Is that your concern? Or is there more?" She looked at him directly. "I'll give her that. There is more. This morning I got a message from my cousin, Daniel Kerr. He's on the board too. He said he has had something stolen from his home office. Papers. Related to the foundation. We don't know yet. He doesn't know what was taken. He said the cabinet was tampered with, but nothing obvious missing. He's frightened. So am I. You came here because you fear theft." She swallowed. "No, I came because someone inside the foundation is doing something. I don't understand what, but I think it's connected to the kitchen." "There's a sentence you don't hear every Tuesday." Wolfe leaned back a hair, which in his scale of movement is like a man taking a stroll. "Connected to the kitchen," he repeated. "What kitchen?" "The one at my apartment, but also the Foundation's demonstration kitchen in Harlem. Last week our head instructor resigned suddenly. He wouldn't say why. He left the city the next day." "Name?" "Dr. Emile Varga." I wrote it down. Not because I trusted my pen more than my memory, but because I trusted Wolfe to ask for it again, and I liked to look prompt. Wolfe said, "You are omitting something." Her eyes flicked away and back. "I can't prove it." "That is irrelevant. I'm not a prosecutor. I'm a detective." "Speak." She breathed out slowly, bracing herself. "My great-grandfather's original recipe journals are missing." That got a visible reaction from Wolfe, a tiny narrowing of the eyes that meant his mind had sat up straighter. You don't spend your life worshipping food the way Wolfe does and hear original recipe journals without feeling a ripple. "Missing," he said. "From where?" "From my apartment kitchen. I keep them in a locked cabinet." I didn't check last night. I checked this morning after Daniel called. The pie-whore. Cabinet has no sign of forced entry, but the journals are gone. How many? 3, bound in dark green leather, handwritten, dated from 1912 to 1930. Value? Financially? She shrugged. A great deal. Sentimentally, they're priceless. It's the Foundation's history. It's my family. Wolfe was silent a moment. When he's silent like that, he's either arranging a mental chandelier or deciding whether to throw you out. I watched his fingers on the chair arm. They were still, which meant he was occupied. Finally, he said, "You have reason to suspect someone within the Kerr Foundation." "Yes." "Name the people with access to your apartment." "Only me, my housekeeper Irina Kozlov twice a week, and the building manager. The service corridor is secured. The kitchen inside the apartment is separate. There is another key to the cabinet, but it is kept in the Foundation's office safe. Daniel and our executive director, Mayhew Sloan, have access." "Who else is on the board?" "Daniel, me, Mayhew, a restaurateur named Claudia Benson, and a food writer, Rafik Tareen." I wrote those down too. 4 or 5 suspects in one breath, served piping hot. This was shaping up like a Wolfe menu already. Wolfe looked at her as if he could see the letters inside the green leather bindings. "Your motives?" "My motives?" She looked startled. "For hiring me. You may wish to retrieve property. You may wish to avoid scandal. You may wish to expose a rival. Be candid." Her cheeks flushed faintly, but she met it. "I want them back. I want to know who is doing this. And yes, I want to avoid scandal. If those journals are sold or leaked, it could ruin the Foundation. We have donors who care about prestige. We have apprentices who trust us. We're about to announce a major grant." "When?" "This Friday." "Where?" "At our annual fundraiser, at the Kerr Townhouse." The journals were going to be displayed. Wolfe's gaze drifted to the clock. Nearly 11. The orchids would pull him away in little more than 10 minutes. That meant a decision would come now, to proceed or dismiss. "You did not call the police," he said. "No." "You have not told the board." "No." "Good." His voice was dry. "You show at least a trace of intelligence. If a thief is within your circle, you do not alert him while you are still ignorant. My fee is $5,000 a day against expenses. If the matter involves recovery of rare culinary manuscripts, there will be a bonus." She didn't blink this time. "That's acceptable." Wolfe raised a brow. "You're either wealthy or desperate." "Both," she said quietly. "Mr. Goodwin will accompany you now and inspect the scene. You will allow him full access. You will also provide a list of all persons who have been in your apartment or the Foundation kitchen during the last 2 weeks." "I can do that." "And, Miss Kerr," Wolfe said, his tone sliding into something like velvet over steel, "if there is anything else you have not told me, now is the moment to repair the mistake." She sat very still. Then she said, "Last night, after I heard the handle, I went into the kitchen with a knife from the block. I thought someone might be inside. No one was. But on the kitchen floor, near the service door threshold, there was a smear. Dark. I thought it was grease. I touched it. It wasn't grease." Wolfe's face stayed blank, but I felt the temperature in the room drop a couple degrees. "What was it?" he asked. "Blood," she said. "Not much, but fresh." Wolfe studied her for a long, unhurried second. "You're sure?" "Yes." "And you did nothing?" "I wiped it up," she admitted. "I panicked." "I see." Wolfe's voice didn't rise. It got heavier. "Mr. Goodwin, you will go. You will take Saul Panzer if necessary. You will also call Inspector Kramer and inform him that a crime has occurred which may involve injury or death." Her head snapped toward me. "Death?" Wolfe gave her a look that was almost pity, which on his face is as rare as a smile from a judge. "Miss Kerr, when blood appears at a door that should not open, It is wise to consider what lurks behind it. I stood up, already reaching for my coat. Okay, Miss Kerr, we'll take a ride. You can tell me on the way whether there's any other reason you didn't call the cops. Like maybe a man you were trying to protect, or a man you were trying not to have found on your kitchen floor. She rose too, a little paler now. There was no man on my floor. Sure, I said, and kitchens never misbehave. Wolfe waved a hand as if swatting a fly. Go, Archie, and do not allow Mr. Brenner to learn that this affair began at his kitchen door. He will regard it as an omen and become sentimental. I have no patience for sentiment before lunch. We filed out. In the hall I caught the faint sound of Fritz moving in the kitchen, the soft clink that said he was, at least for now, unaware of the sacrilege, probably thinking about veal or something beautiful. At the front door, I paused long enough to send a look back toward Wolfe's office. The brownstone had been disturbed, all right. Not by a corpse in the street or a hysterical widow with mascara on her chin, but by a quiet young woman carrying a family secret in a gray coat and a smear of blood she'd wiped away because she was scared of what it meant. That was enough to hook Nero Wolfe, even if he wouldn't admit it until the bill was paid. And if you want to know what hooked me, it was simpler. Nothing good ever happened behind a kitchen door that didn't want to open. Miss Kerr's building was one of those Park Avenue jobs where the lobby furniture looks like it came out of a museum and the doorman dresses better than most grooms. We rode up in silence that wasn't comfortable enough to be called companionable. She was busy looking out the cab window like the view might tell her something useful, and I was busy doing what I always do when Wolfe sends me to sniff a scene before he decides what perfume it wears. In the elevator, she finally spoke. You think someone was hurt in my kitchen? I think you said there was blood. I kept my tone loose. Blood means somebody leaked. Could be a finger, could be a forehead, could be something worse. Wolfe doesn't like to bet against worse. Her mouth tightened. It was a small smear. Small is a style, not a guarantee. We hit her floor. The carpet was thick enough to bury a body in without leaving a bump. She let us into her apartment, and I took in the place the way a bartender takes in a man who sits down too carefully, fast and with a lot of attention to what doesn't fit. Clean lines, expensive furniture, and none of the clutter you get when a person actually lives hard inside four walls. The kitchen, though, was different. Not flashy, not the stainless steel arena you see on cooking shows. It had the warmth of a room meant for work. Good knives, a big wooden block that had earned its scars, jars with handwritten labels, and a copper pot hanging like it had a right to be admired. She led me straight there. The service door was tucked in a corner near a pantry. I squatted and looked at the threshold. Hard to tell anything now. The floor had been mopped and the smear was a memory. But the lock told a story if you listened. Faint gouge marks around the keyhole. The kind you get when somebody uses a slim tool and doesn't quite know the sweet angle. Show me the cabinet, I said. She opened a tall door near the stove. Inside were shelves lined with cookbooks, a few old tins, and an empty slot as clean as a missing tooth. There, she said softly. That's where they were. I leaned in. The inside of the cabinet smelled like paper and spice and a long history of being opened carefully. No pry marks, no broken hinges. Whoever took the journals did it with the key, or with hands invited to act like keys. Where's the safe key kept again? In the foundation office safe. Only Daniel and Mayhew have the combination. And you. I don't have the combination. I never wanted it. That was either modesty, innocence, or a practiced line. I filed it away. Housekeeper? I asked. Irina. She has a key to the apartment, not the cabinet. Talkative? She's private, efficient. She's been with me 3 years. Her chin lifted. She didn't do this. I don't accuse employees until they give me a reason. It's a habit, not a rule. I checked the service door again and moved into the corridor. The hall was narrow, utilitarian, built for silent carts and noiseless feet. The door on the other end led to a service elevator. I pressed the button. Nothing. Private key access, probably. Back inside, I paced slowly, eyes doing a sweep. When did you last see the journals? 2 days ago. I was selecting pages to display for Friday. Alone? Yes. And last week you found the letters box moved? She nodded, just shifted forward like someone had put it back carelessly. Which box? She took me to a shelf above the fridge and pulled down a plain wooden container, old but solid. The lid fit tight. A faint scuff at one corner said it had been forced open recently, but not by brute strength, more like someone who knew where to press. What was in it? Letters between my great-grandfather and a woman named Celeste Armand. She ran a cooking school in Lyon. They were close. Close like professionally close, or close like people stop writing when their spouses come in. Her eyes flickered. The second, I think. Aha. Families don't guard recipe journals like crown jewels unless there's a crown attached to the story. And who knew about the letters? Daniel, Mayhew, Claudia, maybe. She's been digging into history for donor marketing. Rafik has asked about them. I never showed him. Anybody else? She hesitated. Dr. Varga saw them once. He was researching the early curriculum. I walked back to the kitchen. Okay, let's rewind last night. You come home at 11, hear the handle. From where? I was in the living room taking off my coat. Lights on? Only the hallway light. I keep it dim. Then you went in with a knife and found blood. Yes, right here. She pointed to a spot on the tile near the door. Any other mess? Footprints? Anything dropped? No, I checked quickly. I was frightened. Did you smell anything odd? Alcohol, cologne, cigarettes? No cigarettes, but there was a smell like metal, like when you open an old tin. That's blood too sometimes. She wrapped her arms around herself. I should have called the police. Maybe. But you called Wolfe, which in this city is a close second if you want the truth without the paperwork. I pulled my phone out. I'm going to make a call now, not to the cops yet. First to your cousin. She gave me Daniel Kerr's number with a finger that was steadier than her voice. I dialed and got an answer on the third ring. Kerr speaking. Daniel? Archie Goodwin. I'm working with Nero Wolfe. Your cousin hired us. I'm standing in her kitchen looking at the scene. I want to hear about your missing papers. There was a pause that had a pulse in it. What did she tell you? Enough to know you're spooked. Start talking before you get spookier. He exhaled. Someone's been in my office. I found the bottom drawer open. The lock wasn't broken. I keep foundation files there. Old donor lists, board minutes, the grant drafts. Nothing obvious missing, but a folder labeled Almond Correspondence was out of place. I looked at Lila. Her face went sharp. Armand? I said. Yes, Celeste Armand, the Lion School. We were reviewing provenance questions. Lila wanted to display the journals, and Mayhew insisted we verify chain of custody for insurance. Who else knew about that folder? Mayhew, Claudia, Dr. Varga before he quit. Rafik might have heard about it in conversation. His voice dropped. Archie, do you think this is about the journals? I think it's about whatever's sitting underneath them, and somebody's willing to bleed for it. I let that hang a second. Listen, Daniel, don't touch anything else in your office. Don't move papers around to see what's missing. I'm coming to you next, and if Mayhew calls, you say you're busy polishing silver. Another pause. Mayhew hasn't called. He's in a board meeting right now. Where? At the Foundation kitchen in Harlem. I felt the investigation click into a cleaner line. A kitchen in Harlem, a service door on Park Avenue, and 3 green leather journals vanished like a magician's rabbit. Wolfe was going to want that kitchen like a priest wants confession. Good, I said. Tell nobody I called. Especially not Mayhew. We'll talk in person. I hung up and looked at Lila. Her eyes were wide but dry. So they were looking for Celeste Armand, too. Looks that way. I slipped my phone back in my coat. Get your coat. We're going to Harlem. If somebody's sniffing around kitchens, let's see what they're cooking. The ride uptown gave Lila time to thaw just enough to start thinking past her fear. Park Avenue nerves are one thing. Harlem daylight is another. She sat beside me in the cab with her hands in her coat pockets, shoulders squared like she'd decided the best way to avoid falling apart was to hold herself together by force. "You think Mayhew is involved," she said. "I think Mayhew is close to the file that got sniffed and the safe that holds the spare key. That's involvement by geography, if nothing else. But he's been with the Foundation 10 years. He rebuilt it after my grandfather died. He is a human being," I finished. "They're the ones who do these things. Sometimes for good reasons, sometimes for dumb ones, sometimes for the kind of reason that makes them sweat when you say the right name." She stared at her gloves. "Rafik wouldn't. He loves the Foundation. It gave him his career. Loving something doesn't stop you from stealing it. Sometimes it makes you tidier about it." That shut her up, not because she agreed, but because she didn't have a quick comeback. Not everybody grows up sparring with New York logic for sport. We pulled up outside the Kerr Foundation's demonstration kitchen, which occupied the ground floor of a renovated brown brick building that had once been a bakery. The sign out front was tasteful, which meant somebody had paid extra to look humble. Through the big windows you could see stainless work tables, hanging pans, and a few kids in aprons moving with the timid excitement of apprentices who hadn't yet burned anything worth crying over. Inside, the air smelled of onions, yeast, and ambition. A receptionist with a headset looked up as we approached. Lila went into board member mode. Chin up, voice crisp. "Tell Mr. Sloan we need him in the main kitchen. Now." The receptionist hesitated, then tapped her headset. "Yes, Miss Kerr." We moved past her into the main space. At the far end, a half-dozen people stood around a long maple table. The table was set with documents, not cutting boards. It took me a second to sort them. Mayhew Sloan was easy. Tall silver hair that meant he knew how to wear it, suit sharp enough to cut paper without folding it. Claudia Benson looked like every successful restaurateur I've ever met. Eyes quick, posture relaxed, clothes designed to say, "Oh, I'm not impressed by your money." Rafik Tareen was lean, handsome in that newspaper photo way, and he wore a scarf indoors because he'd learned it plays well on stage. The last two were strangers to me. One a young woman with a tablet, probably an assistant, and the other a broad-shouldered man with a chef's jacket and a face that wanted a fight. Mayhew turned when he saw Lila. "Lila, this is unexpected. We're in the middle—" "I know what you're in the middle of," she said, and if I hadn't been standing there, I'd have applauded her timing. "Mayhew, my great-grandfather's journals are gone." For a heartbeat, nobody moved. Then Claudia swore softly. Rafik's eyebrows lifted, and Mayhew went pale in a way that tried to be subtle and failed. "What?" he said. "That's impossible." "Check your vocabulary," I put in. Impossible means the laws of physics would need to be rewritten. This is New York. People steal bicycles while you're still sitting on them. Mayhew looked at me. "Who are you?" "Archie Goodwin. Nero Wolfe's assistant. Miss Kerr retained him this morning." That tightened the air. Mayhew's focus shifted from shock to offense, which is a neat trick if you can do it in half a second. "You hired Wolfe without consulting the board?" "I consulted reality," Lila said. The chef jacket man growled. "Journals? You mean the founder's notebooks?" "3 bound volumes," Lila said. "Taken from my apartment." Claudia pressed her palms to the table. "We were about to display them Friday. Insurance is going to have a coronary." Rafik said quietly, "Were they secure? I mean, were they properly stored?" Lila stared at him. "They were in a locked cabinet. The lock was not forced. Someone had the key." Mayhew's mouth tightened. Only Daniel and I have access to the safe with the spare key. Lila, are you accusing? I'm accusing no one yet, Lila said. But I heard someone at my service door last night. There was blood on my kitchen floor. That did more than tighten the air. It snapped it. The assistant with the tablet sucked in a breath. Claudia went still. Rafiq's eyes flicked to Mayhew, then away. The chef jacket man muttered something in another language. Mayhew recovered first. Blood? Lila, you should have called the police. She called Wolfe, I said. He'll call the police if he thinks they won't trample his deductions. Meanwhile, I need to ask some questions. This is a board matter, Mayhew said sharply. Then answer like a board member and not a man with something to hide. I leaned my hip on the work table, casual on the surface, pointed underneath. Who was in this kitchen last night after closing? The chef jacket man barked a laugh. Nobody. We close at 9. Let's try again, I said. Who has keys and could come after 9? Mayhew said, I do. Claudia. Rafiq. The head instructor had one. Varga. Had, Lila echoed. He resigned. Ran off. Claudia's eyes narrowed. No one says ran off unless they're feeling guilty or scared. Emile quit because of Mayhew's new curriculum contract. He thought it was a betrayal of tradition. Mayhew's head snapped toward her. That is irrelevant. Tradition seems relevant when the tradition vanishes. Claudia shot back. I watched the exchange like a tennis match with a gun in the net. What contract? Mayhew straightened. We're partnering with a private culinary tech group, digitizing recipes, creating an archive. It's how we stay alive in the modern donor landscape. Rafiq said, Emile hated the idea of scanning the journals. He said some things shouldn't be turned into data. And yet, I said, someone turned them into a carrying case and walked away. The assistant stepped forward, nervous. Mr. Goodwin, there is something. This morning I found the pantry inventory clipboard on the floor. It was on the hook when I left last night. I turned. Pantry? She led us 10 feet to a steel door. Inside was a narrow storage room, sacks of flour, tins, spice jars lined on shelves. On the floor near the back wall sat the clipboard, face down. Next to it, a small plastic vial with a red smudge on the cap. Everybody looked at it. Nobody touched it. Well, I said softly, there's your kitchen blood again. Mayhew swallowed. Claudia's eyes hardened. Rafiq took a step back as if the vial might bite. I crouched, careful not to disturb anything. The vial was about the size you'd use for a sample. The smudge wasn't big, but it was real, fresh enough to still shine. Who was last in here? I asked. Silence. Then the chef jacket man said, rough and reluctant, I locked up, but I didn't drop that. What's your name? I asked. Jorge Alvarez, interim instructor. Okay, Jorge. No one says you did. I stood. But somebody was in here last night, and they bled a little while doing something they didn't want on record. That makes this room the most honest person we've met today. I pulled out my phone again. Time to keep Wolfe in the loop, and maybe, finally, time to let Inspector Kramer know the kitchens are talking. When I called Wolfe from the pantry doorway, I kept my voice low enough that the spice jars wouldn't gossip. Wolfe, we're at the foundation kitchen. Board's here. Your journals are officially missing, and we've got a little red souvenir in the pantry. Blood on a sample vial and an inventory clipboard dropped overnight. Lockup says no one was supposed to be here after 9. Somebody was. Wolfe didn't waste breath on exclamations. Describe the vial. Plastic, about thumb size. Cap smeared, looks like something you'd carry a liquid sample in. Any label? None that I can see without picking it up. I didn't. Good. Do not. Summon Inspector Kramer. There is blood in an unauthorized place. That makes it his indigestion. I will speak to him directly when he arrives. Meanwhile, ascertain who had access to that pantry after closing. I already started. I'll keep stirring. Archie, His tone sharpened just a hair. The Kerr journals, you said, were to be displayed Friday. That implies a timetable. Find out who stood to gain most from their appearance and who stood to lose most if they were examined. I'm on it. I hung up and turned to the group, who had arranged themselves in a worried semicircle around the pantry like mourners around a coffin they weren't sure they liked. Okay, I said. Nobody moves anything. We've got a crime scene whether you feel theatrical about it or not. I've called the police. Inspector Kramer will be here soon, and he'll be grumpier than usual because Wolfe's involved. Until then, I want straight answers. Mayhew tried to take command back. Archie, this is a charitable institution. You can't have thieves bleeding in your pantry either, I said pleasantly. Yet here we are. Claudia put her hands on her hips. Ask your questions. Gladly. First, each of you tell me where you were last night between 9 and midnight. They started in order of seniority because that's how people do it when they think dignity might protect them. Mayhew said, I left here at 8:45. Went to a donor dinner at Le Marchand. I was with 2 couples until 11:30. I have receipts and they have mouths. Claudia said, I was at my restaurant in Tribeca until 10. After that, I went home. I live alone except for a cat who doesn't testify. Rafiq's smile showed teeth but not humor. A book launch on the Upper West Side. I stayed until 9:30. After that, drinks with the editor. Home at 11. Lila's voice was steady now, maybe because steadiness was all she had left. I was at my apartment. You know that. Jorge Alvarez rubbed his jaw. I closed kitchen. I lived 2 blocks away. I was home. My wife, my kid. The assistant, Eleanor, she said when I asked, had already spoken. Subway home at 7. Call logs, roommate, boring innocence. Second, I said, who knew about the pantry inventory clipboard? Jorge frowned. Everyone. It hangs on the hook. You check it when you pull supplies. Nothing secret. Third, who had reason to take a sample vial into a pantry after hours? Eleanor said cautiously. We use vials for tasting sets sometimes, for donor presentations, or if we're sending spice samples to partners. Mayhew said too quickly, we don't send spice samples anymore. Claudia turned her head slowly. Why anymore? Mayhew stiffened. Because we used to. With Emil's old heritage audits, he'd catalogue spices for origin verification. It was his obsession, Rafiq murmured, and there was something sharp under it. I watched their faces while Mayhew talked. The moment a word touches a nerve, it shows. Rafiq's eyes stayed on the pantry shelf behind me, too fixed. Claudia's jaw set in that special way people do when a memory turns sour. Mayhew was doing the managerial ballet, smooth, authoritative, and slightly panicked at the ankles. So Emil Varga took spice samples, I said. Where'd he send them? To a lab in Queens. Mayhew said, to verify authenticity. It's standard. Standard for tradition, maybe, not standard for a fancy digital archive. Claudia snorted. Authenticity matters. We've got donors who want heritage, not fiction. And heritage, Lila said quietly, is what those journals were supposed to prove. There it was, handed to me on a silver tray. I nodded. Which brings us to your new contract, Mayhew. I want details. Who's this culinary tech group? Mayhew looked like he'd prefer to swallow a ladle. A company called Palimpsest Gastronomy. They specialize in preserving culinary history through digital reconstruction. Reconstruction, Claudia repeated. That's a polite word for rewriting. It's not rewriting, Mayhew snapped. It's restoring. Some manuscripts are incomplete. Palimpsest can fill gaps, Rafiq said. His voice was casual but cold. Interpret. Modernize. Sell subscriptions. Mayhew glared. You're oversimplifying. Maybe, but oversimplifying is what thieves count on. Lila turned to Mayhew. The board never voted on palimpsest. You said you were exploring options. Why is there a contract already? Mayhew opened his mouth, shut it, then tried again. Because we were in danger of losing the Haraway grant. Palimpsest offered funding in exchange for first rights to digitize the journals. Claudia's eyes went flat. First rights to digitize. Journals you didn't yet own the right to give. You were going to unveil them Friday while your partner waited to scan them. Monday. Emil Varga must have loved that. He resigned because he was emotional, Mayhew said. He didn't understand necessity. Or he understood too well, Rafik said softly. Those journals aren't just recipes, Mayhew. They're evidence of origin, of ownership, of people who don't want their names in print. The room went quiet enough to hear the refrigeration unit sigh. I said, Rafik, you sound like you've been thinking about this. He lifted a shoulder. I write about food. Food is politics with butter on it. That's a nice line, I said. But lines don't bleed in pantries. People do, which means somebody was in here last night with Emil's old sampling kit. Either to test something, steal something, or plant something. And if they bled, they left more than a smear. I looked at each of them again, letting the silence do my work. Then a voice came from the doorway behind us. Heavy steps, a familiar growl. Goodwin, what the hell have you dragged me into now? Inspector Kramer stood there with 2 uniforms and the face of a man who'd like to arrest the calendar for inconvenience. His eyes slid past me to Lila, to Mayhew, to the pantry, and finally landed on the little vial like it was a cockroach on his sandwich. Kramer, I said, welcome to the kitchen. Try not to touch the spices unless you want Wolfe to sue you. He grunted. Where is he? On his way in spirit. In person, he'll call you before lunch and annoy you into cooperation. Kramer sighed like a furnace. All right, nobody leaves. You? He jerked a thumb at Mayhew. Get me a list of keys and access. You? At Jorge. Tell my men about closing procedures. And you, Goodwin, start from the top and tell me why I shouldn't haul everyone here downtown for a nice day of paperwork. I opened my mouth, ready to offer him the short version with a bow on it, when Eleanor the assistant let out a little yelp from the pantry shelf. She was staring at the spice jars, one hand hovering. What is it? I asked. Her voice came thin. One of the jars. It's not ours. We all leaned in. On the middle shelf sat a small glass jar with a plain white label. On it, in black marker, was a single word, Armand. And right beside it, the faintest rust-colored fingerprint smeared on the lid. Nobody spoke for a second. A room full of grown adults reduced to the kind of silence you get when the lights flicker in a theater, and everyone realizes the movie might be about them. Kramer moved first, because cops are trained to distrust stillness. He stepped into the pantry and peered at the jar without touching it. What the hell is that? A spice? It's not ours, Eleanor said again, like repetition might make it less eerie. We don't label anything almond. We label by ingredient and date. Kramer looked at Jorge. You sure? Jorge shook his head, jaw tight. Never seen it. Not my label. Claudia's eyes were on Mayhew. Armand, you said Emil sent samples to a lab. Why would a jar be labeled with a person's name? Mayhew's face did a small, dangerous thing, trying to go blank and landing on guilty instead. I don't know. It could be a joke. Someone who bleeds jokes, I said. Kramer turned on me. Goodwin, I don't care what it could be. I care what it is. You people started this. Tell me the straight story. I gave him the straight story, trimmed to fit a hungry inspector. Missing founder journals, suspected internal access, blood smear at Lila's apartment kitchen service door, Daniel Kerr's rummaged drawer and Armand folder shifted. Emil Varga's abrupt resignation, palimpsest contract, now the blooded vial and the Armand jar. Kramer listened with his mouth grim and his eyes doing that slow crawl over faces that means he's cataloging how each of us might look behind bars. When I got to the jar, he said, "Don't touch it," to one of his uniforms, which was a good idea because the uniform was already reaching. Then to me, "You say Armand's some woman from Lyon. What's she got to do with missing recipes?" "Potentially everything," I said. "Or potentially a dead end. But somebody here thinks the name belongs on a pantry shelf. That makes it a live wire." I nodded to Eleanor. "Let's bag it in the vial. And maybe dust that lid for prints before Wolfe starts quoting French proverbs about clumsiness." Kramer grunted, but he nodded to his men. One of them pulled gloves and evidence bags. The other started photographing, taking the pantry shelf like it was a crime cathedral. Lila stood very still. Her voice came out controlled, but I could hear the small crack under it. "Why would someone put that there?" "To tell you something," Rafik said. Everybody turned to him. He lifted his hands slightly, palms out. Not accusing, just thinking. A labeled jar is a message, either to claim ownership, "This belongs to Armand," or to point at a person, like leaving a calling card. Claudia snorted. "Calling cards are for amateurs or show-offs." "Or for someone trying to steer suspicion," I said. Mayhew was watching the evidence bag like it might bite him. "Maybe it's a meal. Maybe he came back." "You're leaning on that," Claudia said. Hard. Mayhew bristled. "Because it makes sense." He was furious about palimpsest. He knew the journals mattered. He had sampling supplies. He used Armand's name in his provenance work. "And yet he resigned and left town," I said. "Did he?" Mayhew blinked. "What?" "Did anyone actually see him leave town? Taxi receipt, train ticket, goodbye postcard? Or did he vanish in a way convenient for somebody who needed a ghost to blame?" Jorge muttered, "He did leave. I saw him carry a suitcase down the hall. Wednesday night. Alone?" "Yes." "Where'd he go?" Jorge shrugged. He said, "Back to Budapest. That's all." "Budapest doesn't accept verbal bookings. Somebody in the office handled his travel." Eleanor nodded. "I booked his flight. He told me the dates. I emailed the itinerary to him and Mayhew." Kramer's head snapped to her. "Flight to where? When?" "Budapest. Wednesday night, 11:40. JFK." "Did he board?" Eleanor hesitated. I don't know. I didn't check." Kramer grunted. "We will." He was about to drag the conversation further into police territory when his phone buzzed. He listened, frowned, and said, "Yeah, I'm with Goodwin. Send them up." Then he hung up and glared at me like I'd ordered a thunderstorm. "Your boss is on his way," he said. "He called headquarters. Wants to confer. He also said if anyone breaks a jar of cardamom in this building, he'll bill the city." That was Wolfe. I checked my watch. It was past 1, which meant Wolfe had skipped lunch or shoved it back. Both were signs of genuine interest. Lila's eyes widened, half relief, half dread. 5 minutes later, Saul Panza arrived, because the universe likes symmetry. Saul is the kind of private eye who can slip into a room without changing its air. He nodded at me, took in the pantry with one glance, and then stood by the wall like a polite shadow. Kramer was still setting things in motion when Wolfe's voice came through my earbud. "He doesn't do field trips unless orchids are on fire, but he does do telephone command performances." "Archie," he said, "put me on speaker." I did. The room tightened again. "Inspector Kramer," Wolfe said, as if he were greeting a man he'd invited for beer instead of a cop who'd like to choke him. "I understand you are currently among spices. You have my condolences." Kramer growled, but he was listening. "Wolfe, you want to tell me why I'm babysitting a pantry with your assistant? Because you are paid by the public to do so. Now attend. I presume Mr. Goodwin has informed you of the missing journals and the relevance of the Armand connection. I will add a point he has not yet perceived, because he is too busy breathing oxygen." "Thanks," I said. Wolfe ignored me. The appearance of a jar labeled Armand in that pantry is not arbitrary. It is a fragment of a system of provenance verification, specifically a method of Emile Varga's own design. He spoke of it to me 2 years ago when he sought my opinion on culinary falsification. The name on the jar indicates not an ingredient, but a source. Claudia's face sharpened. Rafik leaned in. Mayhew froze. Wolfe continued, "Therefore, last night someone either reenacted Varga's method or sought to imitate it. This narrows our circle to those who knew of it. Mr. Sloane, Ms. Benson, Mr. Tureen, and Ms. Kerr. Possibly also Mr. Alvarez if Varga confided in him. You will note, Inspector, that the method's presence in the pantry suggests an act of comparison, testing the authenticity of something already acquired." Kramer snapped, "Testing what?" "The journals," Wolfe said calmly, "or pages removed from them. There is no other object in this affair worth blood." Lila whispered, "Pages removed." "And," Wolfe went on, "if pages were removed, one asks why. Not to sell recipes. A thief could sell entire volumes more easily. Pages are removed only to conceal a specific content. The content, I submit, concerns Celeste Armand." The room felt suddenly too small. Wolfe's voice lowered, almost lazy. "Archie, bring the jar and the vial, under police custody, naturally, to West 35th Street. Also bring Miss Kerr, Mr. Sloane, and Ms. Benson. Mr. Tureen may come if he wishes. Otherwise, Mr. Panzer will locate him later." Rafik's mouth twitched. "How kind." "And Inspector," Wolfe said, "you will do me the courtesy of allowing this to proceed without arresting innocent persons prematurely. When you wish to arrest someone, I will tell you whom." Kramer's face went purple in imagination. "Why should I?" "Because," Wolfe said, pleasantly murderous, "you're competent enough to know when you're outmatched. Good day." The line went dead. I let out the breath I'd been holding and looked at the faces around me. Mayhew was pale. Claudia was angry. Rafik was thoughtful in a way that made me itch. Lila was frightened, but there was steel under it now. Wolfe had given her a theory, and theories are life rafts. Kramer jabbed a finger at me. "You heard him. Get your circus back to your tent. And Goodwin, if this turns into a homicide, you're not spinning it into one of Wolfe's parlor tricks." "I'll try to keep the blood off the carpets," I said. We left the pantry to the uniforms and the cameras. As we headed out, Claudia fell into step beside me. "Archie," she said low, "Mayhew's lying. I don't know about what, but he is." "Join the line," I said. She glanced at Lila ahead of us. "Those journals, if they're gone because of Celeste Armand, you need to find out who she really was to the family. The foundation story's clean, the real one isn't. I've seen hints." "Hints of what?" "Of a recipe that wasn't a recipe." Her eyes flicked, wary. "Talk later." "Not here." We hit the sidewalk, the cab line, the afternoon noise. Behind us, the kitchen windows looked innocent, full of light and steam and kids learning to chop onions without losing fingers. But inside that pantry, there had been a jar with a name on it and blood on the lid. And now Wolfe had pulled the case tighter, like a noose made of logic. I had a feeling the kitchen door that shouldn't open still wasn't done opening. The trip back downtown had the feel of a convoy that didn't want to admit it was one. I rode with Lila in the first cab, mostly because Wolfe had named her specifically and I didn't intend to let her out of my sight long enough for a misunderstanding to happen. Mayhew and Claudia took the second, with Saul folding into their back seat like a polite upholsterer. Rafik waved off the invitation on the curb with a smile that said he was doing us a favor by not coming. "Mr. Panzer will find me if he must," he'd said. "I'm due at a radio studio in 20 minutes. Wolfe wasn't going to like that. But Wolfe considers like a luxury item anyway. In our cab, Lila stared at the blur of streets like she was trying to see her great-grandfather's ink between the buildings. Wolfe thinks someone pulled pages out. He said it. Doesn't mean it's true yet. But why would they? Unless the pages say something someone wants quiet. I watched her profile. It held too much pride for easy guilt. Tell me what you know about Celeste Armand. She frowned. Only what the letters suggest. She ran a school. She taught my great-grandfather in Lyon when he was young. They wrote for years. There are affectionate passages. He never mentioned her in public. The family says he came back to New York alone. Family stories are like soups, I said. They taste better after you strain out the bones. She didn't smile. You think she had a child? It's one of many things I might think. Wolfe thinks more. We'll let him. By the time we hit the brownstone, the afternoon had gone a shade grayer, the kind that makes New York look like it's holding its breath. Fritz let us in with a face so calm it could have been carved out of butter. I could see his eyes count heads, and I knew he was already disapproving of the fact that they weren't carrying groceries. "Mr. Goodwin," he said in that soft Swiss tone, "there is a roast in progress. I hope your business will not require a funeral." "Not unless we botch it," I told him. "Keep the roast warm. Wolfe's in full think mode." "That is no surprise," Fritz said, and withdrew like a stage curtain. We went to the office. Wolfe was already in his chair, a massive island in a sea of impatience. He'd set a decanter of beer near his elbow, untouched. That was his version of a siren on the roof. He looked at Lila first. "Miss Kerr, sit." Then at Mayhew and Claudia as they came in behind. "Mr. Sloane, Miss Benson, sit. Mr. Goodwin, you will be moderately quiet." "Startling order of likelihood," I said, but I sat at my desk and slid the evidence bags Kramer had released to me onto the side table within Wolfe's line of sight. Wolfe didn't touch them. He never grabs the physical clue until he has already taken its measure in his head. He studied the jar through plastic as if the label might blush. "Armand," he said softly. "A name used as a cipher." Mayhew started to speak. Wolfe lifted a hand, the quiet, lethal kind of interruption. "Not yet. You will answer when I ask, and you will not editorialize." Mayhew swallowed and shut up. Wolfe turned his gaze to Claudia. "Miss Benson, Mr. Goodwin reports that you suggested the Foundation's public narrative about Celeste Armand is incomplete. Explain." Claudia's eyes darted to Lila, then back to Wolfe. "I'm not in the habit of spilling family secrets to strangers, even fat ones." Wolfe accepted the insult the way a rhinoceros accepts a mosquito. "I'm not a stranger to secrets, nor, in this context, to family. Speak." Claudia exhaled. "I've been pulling archival material for donor packages. The Foundation likes to sell the story that Kerr returned from France with pure tradition and built a school to preserve it. But there are holes." She tapped a finger on her knee. "In 1921, he sent money to Lyon every quarter for 3 years. Not to a school account, to a private address. We traced it. The address belonged to Celeste Armand." Lila's eyes widened. "You never told me that." I hadn't finished verifying it. Wolfe said, "Proceed." Claudia went on. "Later correspondence, board minutes from the 30s. Mentions receiving materials from Armand estate after Celeste died. No detail. But it lines up with when those journals start referencing CA in the margins." "CA," Wolfe murmured. "Initials, not ingredients." Mayhew suddenly found his voice. "This is irrelevant to theft." Wolfe stared him into silence again. "You are wrong. It is the spine of this affair. Mr. Sloane, did you authorize Palimpsest Gastronomy to digitize the journals?" Mayhew straightened, anger fighting caution. "Yes, we needed the money. The Haraway grant required a modernization component." "Did you disclose to the board that Palimpsest would claim exclusive first rights to the journals?" "We were negotiating. I intended to bring a final draft Friday." "That is not an answer." Mayhew's jaw tightened. No, I didn't disclose the exclusivity clause. Lila's face went white, then red. You had no right. Wolfe waved her down without looking. Later, Miss Kerr. Mr. Sloane, what did palimpsest expect to gain from exclusivity? Financial return is obvious. What else? It's a prestige product, Mayhew said defensively. A flagship archive. They want the Kerr name tied to their platform. And, Wolfe said mildly, if the journals contained something that compromised that platform's claim, something about provenance, ownership, inheritance, palimpsest would want that removed before scanning. Mayhew blinked. What are you implying? I am implying nothing, Wolfe said. I am deducing. There is a difference. He leaned a fraction toward Lila. Miss Kerr, your great-grandfather's journals, besides recipes, are likely to contain personal notations, perhaps regarding Celeste Armand, perhaps regarding a child. Have you ever seen such a notation? Lila shook her head, rigid. No, I didn't read every page. I respected them. Respect is often ignorance wearing polite clothes. Wolfe's eyes slid to me. Archie, you said Daniel Kerr's Armand correspondence folder was disturbed. That folder is itself a clue. What was in it? Didn't open it, I said. You told me not to start rearranging the soup. Wolfe grunted approval. Mr. Sloane, what is in that folder? Mayhew hesitated. 1 second too long. Claudia saw it. I saw it. Lila saw it like a spotlight. It's a legal review, Mayhew said finally, about the Armand materials, their ownership, whether they were donated properly. By whom? Wolfe asked. By Celeste Armand's niece in 1934. And did the review uncover anything troubling? No. Wolfe's voice stayed soft, which meant dangerous. Then why did you commission it in secrecy, and why did Emile Varga resign in protest? Mayhew flushed. Emile resigned because he was sentimental and stubborn. He believed culinary heritage belongs to the past. I believe it belongs to the living. And your belief, Wolfe said, required a confidential legal review, a rushed exclusivity arrangement, and a Friday unveiling designed to lock donors into the narrative before questions could be asked. You're a man of strategy, Mr. Sloane. I applaud it. I do not yet forgive it. Mayhew half rose. This is outrageous. Sit down, Wolfe said. And Mayhew sat. Not because he wanted to, but because Wolfe's voice made sitting feel like the only safe furniture in the room. Wolfe turned his head slightly. Archie, before Mr. Panzer retrieves Mr. Tureen, you will telephone Palimpsest Gastronomy and ask for their project lead. Do not identify yourself as my assistant. Be charming. Determine whether they received any journal pages or samples in the last 48 hours. Right now? Immediately. I picked up the phone, because when Wolfe says immediately, he means before the word finishes echoing. As I dialed, I caught Claudia watching Mayhew, and Mayhew watching the evidence bags like they were storm clouds with his name on them. And Lila sat very still, looking at the jar labeled Armand, the way a person looks at a family portrait they suddenly aren't sure they belong in. The phone rang. Somewhere up the line, a receptionist at Palimpsest Gastronomy was about to learn that kitchens sometimes have doors that open the wrong way. When I got Palimpsest Gastronomy on the line, I played it light, the way Wolfe trained me. Like a man asking about a dinner reservation while he's actually counting exits. Palimpsest, the receptionist said, bright enough to be dangerous. Hi, I told her. I'm calling on a heritage query. I'm helping a donor evaluate a culinary provenance package tied to the Kerr Foundation, who handles incoming manuscript material. There was some polite shuffling, the click of an internal transfer, and then a man came on who sounded like he'd been born wearing a headset. Felix Haraway, he said. Project lead. Felix, terrific. Quick one. Have you received any Kerr manuscripts or related samples in the last couple of days? I'm updating a schedule. A pause. The kind you hear when somebody's brain moves from welcome mat to security gate. "We haven't received anything from the Foundation this week," Haraway said carefully. "Directly from the Foundation," I agreed cheerfully. "How about through a courier, under a private seal? Sometimes boards do things quietly when insurance policies are involved." Another pause, smaller this time. "There was an envelope yesterday. No letterhead. It contained 2 photocopied pages from a journal, pages marked for digitization testing, and a small vial of powdered spice labeled Armand. We assumed it was from Dr. Varga. He'd mentioned sending samples." "Did you speak to him?" "No. The envelope came with a handwritten note. Test these for authenticity before Friday. Discreet." "Handwriting familiar?" "Not to me. It was block print." "Where's the envelope now?" "In our security file. I can send you scans if you're authorized." "I'll arrange authorization," I said. "And Felix, don't mention this call to anyone except your legal counsel. You might have just walked into a family argument with knives on the table." He made a small sound in his throat that said he understood the word knives too literally. I hung up and leaned back, letting the pieces settle. 2 photocopied pages and a spice vial labeled Armand. Discreet test before Friday. That wasn't a random pantry prank. That was a rehearsal for a story somebody wanted to tell the donors before anyone could check the footnotes. I relayed it to Wolfe. He didn't grunt this time. He went quiet in that predatory way that makes my skin prickle. "Thank you, Archie," he said finally. "Now we have the hinge. Bring everyone here." Everyone meant everyone. By 5 o'clock, the office looked like a hostile cocktail party, arranged by a man with a grudge against small talk. Lila sat rigidly in the red leather chair, eyes bright with fatigue and something close to dread. Claudia was on the sofa, spine straight, anger held in a neat container. Mayhew tried to occupy a visitor's chair as if it were a corporate boardroom seat, but the sweat at his temples betrayed him. Daniel Kerr arrived next, pale and shaken, but with family stubbornness pulling his shoulders back. Rafik Tareen came in last, 10 minutes after Saul fetched him from his radio studio, and he wore his charm like a coat he could remove if he needed to run. Inspector Kramer and one uniform took up the corner by the door, the way thunder takes up a horizon. Fritz drifted in and out with trays of beer and coffee. Expression serene, but I saw his eyes clock the evidence bags like they were insults to his pantry. Wolfe let them all settle. He watched. He always watches first. People in Wolfe's office are like chess pieces that get chatty when they think they're still in a box. Wolfe waits until they show which squares they're afraid of. At last, he said, "We will proceed. There will be no interruptions. If you speak when I do not solicit it, you will be asked to leave. If you refuse, Mr. Goodwin will assist Inspector Kramer in physically escorting you. This is not theater. It is sanitation." He turned his head slightly toward Lila. "Miss Kerr, your great-grandfather's journals are in my safe. Mr. Goodwin retrieved them an hour ago from a locker at Grand Central Station." Every face moved at once. "What?" Lila breathed. Daniel blurted, "How?" Rafik's eyes narrowed. Claudia went perfectly still. Mayhew's mouth opened without sound. Wolfe raised a hand. "The locker key was mailed to this brownstone this afternoon inside a plain envelope with no return address. Mr. Panzer intercepted it by arrangement. The sender believed he was sending it to a different address." Kramer grunted. "Different address?" Wolfe nodded. "Palimpsest gastronomy." I watched Mayhew at that. The man didn't flinch. He sagged. It was subtle, but it was the body's confession before the mouth finds language. Wolfe continued. The journals were removed from Miss Kerr's apartment using the spare key held in the Foundation safe. The theft was calculated not for profit by sale, but for profit by alteration. Claudia said, tight. "Alteration of what?" "Of the story the Kerr Foundation intended to unveil on Friday." Wolfe's eyes moved to Mayhew. Mr. Sloane negotiated an exclusivity contract with Palimpsest Gastronomy to digitize the journals. He did not disclose this to the board because disclosure invited scrutiny. Scrutiny invited delay. Delay risked the Haraway grant and Palimpsest's money. Mayhew stiffened. That isn't a crime. Not in itself, Wolfe agreed. It is merely an offense against governance. But your next step was a crime. He reached to the side table and, without opening it, tapped the evidence bag containing the photocopied pages Saul had already obtained from Palimpsest. These pages were sent anonymously to Palimpsest yesterday with a spice vial labeled Armand, using Dr. Varga's old provenance method as camouflage. The sender wanted Palimpsest to verify authenticity before Friday, discreetly. Why? Because Friday was the day your donors were to be shown the journals as proof of an immaculate heritage narrative. A narrative already compromised. Lila whispered. Compromised how? Wolfe looked at her gently, which for him is like a glacier deciding to melt one corner. By Celeste Armand. Daniel frowned. She was just a teacher. She was more, Wolfe said. And you know it, Mr. Kerr, though you have never spoken it aloud. The Armand correspondence folder, your office contained a legal review of ownership. That review was commissioned because when Celeste Armand died, certain materials came to the Kerr Foundation through a niece. But the niece's right to donate depended upon a chain you feared might be disputed. Rafik said softly, disputed by whom? Wolfe turned to him. By a descendant. Rafik held Wolfe's stare. There is no descendant. You are mistaken. Wolfe's voice stayed calm. Celeste Armand bore a child in 1919. The father was your great-grandfather, Lila. He provided financial support covertly because he had already returned to New York and married into the Kerr line. The letters in your box, Miss Kerr, contain references to this child. They use a pet name, Little Raff. I felt Daniel's breath hitch. Lila's hand flew to her mouth. Claudia shut her eyes, once, hard. Rafik went very still, as if the air around him had suddenly turned into glass. Wolfe said, the child remained in France. The Kerr family never acknowledged him publicly. After Celeste's death, the son inherited certain culinary manuscripts and correspondences. Those were later donated to the foundation when the son died without issue. The donation was a kindness, but it did not extinguish the possibility of moral claim. Rafik's voice was low, tight. You're telling a fairy tale. No, Wolfe said, and now there was iron in it. I'm telling you what the journals say. He didn't open the safe. He didn't need to. His certainty was its own exhibit. Mayhew surged up from his chair, not with anger, but desperate momentum. This is insane. There is no proof. Those journals are private family artifacts. And you intended to keep them private in precisely the way that served you, Wolfe said. Mayhew froze. You found the references when you prepared the Palimpsest deal, Wolfe went on. You realized that digitization would expose the Armand material to scrutiny, and that donors, especially those obsessed with pure heritage, might recoil at scandal. Worse, you feared the Armand story might invite legal nuisance or reputational attack on your contract. So you stole the journals, removed or copied the relevant pages, and attempted to verify them through Dr. Varga's method to see how far their authenticity could be challenged or softened. Claudia said quietly, that's why the jar was labeled Armand. You were reenacting Emil's provenance checks. Wolfe nodded. Yes, and in your haste, Mr. Sloane, you cut yourself. The blood in Miss Kerr's kitchen was from your hand when you tested the cabinet lock after removing the volumes. The blood in the pantry and on the jar lid was from the same cut, reopened while you handled Varga's sampling kit. Your wound is small, your foolishness is not. Mayhew's face went slack. You can't prove that blood is mine. Inspector Kramer can, Wolfe said placidly. He will secure a Sample and compare it to the traces. If you wish to save him time, you may confess. Mayhew looked around the room at Lila's stricken face, Claudia's fury, Daniel's disbelief, Rafik's stillness like a held knife, Kramer's granite patience. He tried to speak. The first attempt yielded only air. Then, "I did it to protect the Foundation." Lila's voice cracked. "You stole my family's history." "I stole it to keep it alive," he said hoarsely. "You don't understand the donors, the politics. Palimpsest wasn't going to pay for a scandal. Haraway wasn't going to name a grant after a man who abandoned a child in France. We would have lost everything." "You could have told us," Daniel said, raw. "And watched you argue until Friday was ashes?" "No." Claudia shook her head. "You didn't protect tradition. You protected your deal." Mayhew flinched. "Maybe both." Kramer stepped forward with the slow relish of a man who'd been right to wait. "All right, Sloane. You're coming with me. We'll do the blood test and the paperwork downtown." Mayhew didn't resist. He looked smaller walking to the door than he had sitting in Wolfe's chair. Strategy had been his armor, and once Wolfe named it, it flaked off. Rafik finally spoke, voice soft. "If what you say is true, Wolfe, why didn't the family ever acknowledge him?" Wolfe regarded him a moment. "Cowardice, convenience, the usual ingredients, but do not mistake their silence for your erasure. The journals are evidence of a truth the living will now have to digest." Rafik swallowed. It wasn't a man collapsing into melodrama. It was a man accepting a new weight. Lila's eyes were wet. "What happens to the Foundation?" Wolfe leaned back, immense and unhurried in victory. "It survives if it is honest. You will tell your donors before they tell you. You will frame the Armand story not as taint, but as human complexity entwined with culinary genius. Food, Miss Kerr, is not pure. It is a record of our compromises and our hungers." She nodded slowly. Daniel reached for her hand, and she let him. Kramer ushered Mayhew out. The door closed. The brownstone exhaled like it had been holding breath since 10:42 yesterday morning. Fritz appeared as if summoned by the release of tension alone. "Dinner is served," he announced firmly, the way a priest announces salvation. His eyes flicked to Wolfe. "And it will not be served again." Wolfe's mouth almost smiled. "Almost. Thank you, Fritz. That is justice." After the others left, Rafik with his thoughts, Claudia with a promise to help rebuild the truth, Lila and Daniel with a family they had to relearn. Wolfe sat in his chair, beer finally in hand. He said thoughtfully, "A man may steal recipes to sell them, but to steal a story to preserve his appetite for power, there is the real vulgarity." I grinned. "You're saying Mayhew was a bad cook?" "I am saying," Wolfe replied, "that he misunderstood the nature of heritage. You do not preserve cuisine by sterilizing it. You preserve it by acknowledging every hand that ever touched the pot." He took a sip, then added, almost to himself, "Even the hands that bled." I gathered my notes, feeling the day settle in my bones. "Well, boss, maybe next time the only blood in the kitchen will be from a rare steak." Wolfe looked at me over the rim of his glass, calm as an anchored ship. "One may hope. But hope, Archie, is not a method." "No," I said, heading toward the dining room where Fritz's roast was waiting to restore order the way only Fritz can. "But it sure pairs nicely with gravy."